Are you a student or a frequent traveller and the weight in your backpack is an issue? And do you want to game while you're on the go? Well, the 14-inch Razer Blade may be just for you. So, let's take a look. So, I've just surpassed 2,000 subscribers and I would like to thank you for your help in doing that. And what I've decided to do is do a game giveaway every 1,000 subscribers. And what you have to do is find a cartoon character who I've called the Geek. Here's his picture here. I will embed him in the video and you have to let me know whereabouts in the video he is with the time frame. So if it's like 5 minutes, 20 seconds in, that's where he is. Now the first person to email me with that information, I'll put my email address at the bottom here, then they win. If it's a draw split, I split it. Simple as that. There's no purchasing required or anything like that. Just need to watch my video. I'll put it anywhere in the video, so just pay attention and good luck and thanks again. And today we're going to take a look at the Razer Blade. It's finally crafted out of black anodized aluminium. It's got a non-aggressive design. It's subtle. It's ideal for business or a student notebook. The screen is very rigid, but it can start to show a few fingerprints on the chassis. So care must be taken also not to scratch or chip it, as the silver aluminium will start to show underneath. I do like the absence of the stickers on the chassis. It's very refreshing. The only emblem that cries gamer is the green glowing Razer snake on the lid at the back. Unfortunately, there's no way to turn this off other than to put a skin over the back of it. You know, at just 4.2 pounds, it's light, and at 13 inches long, 9 inches wide, and 3/4 of an inch thin, it doesn't take up too much room in your computer bag. Now my unit was $1,800 from Best Buy. So what competition does it have? Well, the MSI GS43 VR is also a 14-inch laptop and it weighs just under 4 pounds. It has a smaller battery but does have an Ethernet port and an SD card reader, and it's cheaper at about $1,500. The Aorus X3 V6 is priced at $1,900 and has a QHD Plus 3200 by 1800 display. It's got overclockable i7-6820HK CPU and an SD card reader, a larger battery, and also weighs just under 4 pounds. On paper, that looks like a very capable machine, and you must also consider the Alienware 13. It's a bit heavier at 6 pounds, but it can be configured with a wide range of CPUs and various price points. It also has the Alienware amplifier port for increased future-proofing. So the Razer Blade may be small in stature, but you know, don't let that fool you. It's as powerful as many gaming desktops out there. So let's take a look at specs. This model has an i7-6700HQ quad-core CPU with a turbo boost up to 3.5 GHz. It has 16 GB of DDR4 2400 MHz RAM, a 256 GB SSD, and a GTX 1060 GPU. Now, one important thing to do before anything else is update the NVIDIA driver on battery, not plugged in. There is an NVIDIA bug on the Razer which stops Optimus from working. Updating the driver on the battery forces Optimus to work and increases the battery life and frame rates. So let's take a look at its ports. On the left hand side, it has two USB 3 ports and a combo headphone microphone jack. On the right hand side, it has a Thunderbolt 3 port, a USB 3 and an HDMI 2.0 port, plus a Kensington lock. Now the front and back are port free. There's no Ethernet port here or SD card reader, so you must rely on the Killer 1535W LAN card. It also has Bluetooth 4.1. So the omission of the Ethernet port basically shows that this laptop is not meant for a desk, it's meant to be carried around. Now underneath you've got two fans, one for the GPU and one for the CPU. And it's got an ingenious exhausting mechanism with vents in between the screen and the hinge. Now there's a bit of plastic covering the top here in that joint, and it is probably the cheapest area of the laptop. It does click when you press it. It's got two rubber strips on the base here to give airflow when it's on the desk. Now the trend on thin and light laptops is to limit upgrade options, but this is a gaming machine after all, so let's take a look inside. Holding together are 10 Torx screws. Now, once inside, the upgradable options are quite limited. You can increase the size of the SSD, and that's about it. My unit came with a 256GB PCI Express M2 NVMe drive, So I recommend you configure it with a larger drive, because games these days are 40 gigs or more, and they've also got Windows updates. Now the RAM slots are underneath the motherboard, so again, make sure to configure this to maximum amount of RAM that you can afford when you buy it. The keyboard has some nice travel and good sound to them when they are pressed. Now I do like the row of F keys lighting up when you press the FN key. I think that is a nice touch. The key lights can be lowered using the keys or using software, so that is nice. Now, one thing I did not like was how the secondary function keys, like the brackets, the plus sign, that type of thing, don't light up when the keys are lit up. Now, I found that quite annoying. So the Razer Blade touts it has a anti-ghosting keyboard. So in other words, if you press a number of keys at the same time, it will register their presses. So I'm pressing FGH, and it does work indeed. And how about some of the number keys together? 6, 7, and 8. So indeed, it does register each individual key. So that's nice. Now I do like how the keys remain cool at around about 27 to 32 degrees. And I think this is because the fans blow up and keep those keys cool. Now the palm rests do get hot while gaming. 34 to 38 degrees. But this is where the battery is located, so that's to be expected. The touchpad also gets fairly warm at 36 degrees. But the exhaust area at the hinge there does get very warm. Now if you close the lid, then it certainly gets even hotter still. The Synaptic Trackpad, it's nice and large, so a nice smooth glass finish. 2-finger scrolling is responsive and accurate. Unfortunately, pinch to zoom is rather jittery. My main gripe is the size of the mouse buttons. They're very small. It's often very easy just to miss them. Now, 1-finger tapping does work on the touchpad, but only at the center. Around the periphery, it doesn't really work at all. What about bloatware and software, I hear you cry? Many manufacturers bundle trials of Norton or WinZip or similar programs. Thankfully, Razer have listened to their gaming audience and just include their Razer Synapse software. Synapse tournament drivers allow you to take your profiles and macros and your settings to a tournament. You can also assign individual keys to do different functions, such as keyboard functions, mouse functions, macros, launching various programs, multimedia, Windows shortcuts, and you can even disable the key. You can alter the brightness level of the keys, whether it's on battery or when it's plugged in. You can enter the chroma configurator, where you can assign the color of the keys to either all of the keys or certain groups. You have various presets, for example, static, ripple, reactive, and wave, and you can create different colors for each one and have them on layers so that they work at the same time. Within many of the effects, you can create different patterns, the speed, and also configure whether it's activated automatically or on a key press. You have a gaming mode section where you can disable certain keys and create a profile and link it to a particular game. And you have a power section where you can turn off the lighting and control your fans. You also have the option to look at your keystrokes and also your mouse clicks in a game. I do question how useful this information actually is. Now my model has a 1920 by 1080 IPS matte display. There's certainly plenty bright indoors, but what is it like outside? Or perhaps you're sitting next to a window with some glare. Even at 100% brightness and with a matte surface, it does show some reflections when at an angle, but straight on, it is visible, even when the brightness is lowered to 25%. Viewing angles are good, as you would expect with an IPS display. Using a light meter, I measured the brightness. Now it's best to compare my reading with the measurements I take on my other laptops using the same meter. Now the Razer measured 287 lux, so it is indeed brighter than my MSI GT73 VR, which measured at 205, and my Alienware 17 QHD, which measured 268. Now the colour accuracy of the IPS display is quite disappointing. 92% of sRGB, 71% of Adobe RGB, and 68% of NTSC. Light bleed is minimal. What you see there is the light from the text shining through. Now, one bane of thin gaming laptops is cooling and fan noise. Let's take a look. The Blade has two small fans with curved blades, probably to optimize the airflow and lower fan noise. As you can see, the CPU and GPU share the same heat pipes. As a baseline, ambient noise is about 27 decibels. At idle, you can hear the fans, but they're not loud. And in fact, they measure the same 27 decibels. Certainly firing up a game increases the fan noise to about 37 decibels, but at no point did they drown out the volume of my game. In fact, the two unobtrusive speakers were fairly powerful, producing about 65 decibels. Now, the sound is certainly lower than a system with a subwoofer, but you know, they do get a job done and will fill a small room quite nicely. Now, the Blade comes with a 2 megapixel webcam, so let's take a look at what that looks like. This is what it looks like and sounds like. The 165 watt power brick is light and only just weighs just over a pound, but it does get extremely hot at 49 degrees. I wanted to see how much power the laptop would pull, so let's take a look at that. Under normal gaming conditions, it pulled about 123 watts, but under extreme load, such as using Firmark and Prime 95 at the same time, it pulled 140 watts. Now, if the PowerBook is 90% efficient, that would only give about 9 watts leeway. Now, I didn't see any battery drain, but I would have liked to have seen a 180 watt power brick on this. So how hot did the Blade get under my extreme temperature test? Now, this is where I crank up the room temperature and I bash it with Firmark and Prime 95. Now, remember, I also have the lid closed in this test. Now, this inhibits airflow out of those vents in between the screen and the base. Now, the CPU cooked at 98 degrees, and that was just only after a few minutes. So I wouldn't recommend playing any games with the lid closed, particularly if you have a hot room. The laptop has a 70 watt hour battery, so I was excited to see what the battery life would be, particularly since the Blade is geared up towards portability after all. Now, initially, I was very disappointed. With the screen at 25% brightness, power saver activated and battery saver activated, I streamed YouTube videos and I got 3 hours 23 minutes. I ran it twice with the same results. I was perplexed. I then reinstalled the NVIDIA drivers whilst it was unplugged and reran the test. And what a difference that made. I got 6 hours 46 minutes. So definitely make sure you do that. Now, gaming on high settings and high performance saw about 1 hour 5 minutes, which is normal. All right. I bet you're sick of me waffling on, so let's take a look at benchmarks. I do some CPU tests, comparing it to my MSI GT62 VR, and some GPU tests. I do one game with the outgoing 980M. So let's take a look. So measuring the boot up time, we get just about 12 seconds. The SSD is fast. Write speeds 318 megabytes per second, read speeds of 1.5 gigabytes per second. Using Handbrake to convert a 4 gigabyte video file to MP4, Razer Blade does it in 4 seconds, averaging 22.3 frames per second, whilst the same processor in the GT62 VR averaged 21.7 frames per second and was over a minute behind. Next we have Passmark 9 on the Razer Blade versus the MSI GT62 VR. Both have identical CPUs. This test measures CPU performance, GPU performance, hard drive speed, and memory test. MSI finished ahead because of the faster GPU, but the Razer Blade wasn't that far behind. Note the highest CPU mark and the disk mark for the Razer Blade. PC Mark 8 also tests a range of computer activities. I tried to pick out functions that would stress the CPU, such as video and photo editing. The GT62 VR and the Blade were pretty close, MSI just edging it, possibly because of the better video card. Running the CPU benchmark Cinebench R15, again the Blade beat the GT62 VR with the same CPU, 681 points versus 642. To test its muscle in a VR game, I loaded up Raw Data, which is the most graphical intensive Vive game I have, and it played it flawlessly. Game was fun, no jittering at all. I recommend it. The GTX 1060 was a champ at overclocking, an extra 182 on the core and 512 on the memory. Let's see how much improvement that gives. In TimeSpy, overclocking the GPU gave a 6% improvement to 3,668 points. Now, before running Firestrike, I did the update to E4.0 from E2, as this was supposed to get your score above 9,000. Well, I could only get over 9,000 points by overclocking the GPU, giving a 5% increase. Looking at Rise of the Tomb Raider, at stock the GTX 1070 beat the 1060 by 49%. Overclock it though, it got beat by 63%. Look at the 980M there in red, it's pretty much on par with the GTX 1060. It's interesting to note that the 1060 doesn't seem to benefit too much switching to DX12 compared to the 1070. Very strange. Turning to Rainbow Six Siege, the GTX 1070 beat the 1060 by 55%, and overclocking the 1060 gave an 8% increase. That's okay. Ark Survival Evolved is a huge open world game. Now I played this at 1920 by 1080 and it's certainly very taxing, 35 frames per second. Overclock it though, a good old 28% increase to 45, and for shits and giggles I ran it at the 3440 by 1440 medium settings and got 29 FPS. I ran it at that higher resolution because the Blade is available in the QHD Plus display, so you can just see how hard it would be to play a game at that resolution. Mafia 3 at high settings, 41 frames per second, overclocking it didn't do anything at all. Battlefield 1 saw a respectable 55 frames per second. Compared to the GTX 1070 though, it did lose by around about 53%, which you'd expect. In Doom we got 78 frames per second, overclocking it yielded an extra 10%, and the GTX 1070 was 46% faster. The temperatures of the CPU and GPU were very consistent, around about 80 degrees on the CPU and around about 77 degrees on the GPU. The power draw on the CPU and the GPU were also consistent, the GPU pulling 82 watts and the CPU 32 watts. This translated into good frequencies with no throttling. The CPU minimum frequency was 3090 MHz and maxing out at 3494. The non-overclocked GPU maxed out at 1816 MHz and overclocking it to 1985 MHz. So to conclude, I really like this Razer Blade 14-inch. It is light, it is small, portable, has plenty of ports, although I do miss that SD card reader. It does have fabulous battery life. The speakers are clear and reasonably loud. I really like how the keys are cooled by the fans underneath. It's a bit like air conditioning for your fingers. The rest of the chassis does get rather warm, and it may not be the best laptop to game on your legs. It's easy to block the airflow underneath. It does get hot at the back end there where the air vents are. The lighting is cool and it's fun to play with, but I'm sure after the novelty wears off, you will keep on just keep it on one mode. The other included software, such as the ability to see where you click in a game, that just seems to be a novel to me, and I doubt I'll be using that. More interesting is the additional software you can download for free from their website. Razer Comms is a voice chat gaming messenger with an in-game overlay. Razer Cortex allows you to share your games on Facebook and YouTube and even back up your settings. You also get FL Music Studio for free. CPU performance I thought was very good. It was top notch and beat my GT62 VR. And it stays cool. I like that. Now gaming performance, the GTX 1060 is okay. I've got not much to compare it with, but I was expecting a bit more performance, to be honest. It seemed to perform very close to my 980M. I was concerned how close I was getting to the power of the power brick, particularly under extreme load. Ultimately, you do get a very fine laptop, top-notch build quality. Is it worth compared to the competition? It's certainly, the build quality is much better than the MSI GT62 VR, but that is more geared towards those on a budget. The Alienware 13 is heavier, has comparable build quality, and the EOS X3 V6 looks like a quality top performer in the same weight category, and I would see that as probably its main competition. Now, thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please click the subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.